Welcome to the Page One Podcast, a podcast featuring a variety of guests and thought leaders on topics ranging from digital marketing, sales channel strategies, influencer marketing, best-in-class product launches, and all the details about how to accelerate sales. Now, here's your host, Luke Peters.
Thanks for joining us on the Page One Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Peters, CEO of New Air Appliances. And before we get started here, I wanted to kind of let everybody know, starting out a new not-for-profit 501c3, and it's called vetcation.org, going to be helping out military families getting a free week's vacation. Most of these families can't afford this, and it's going to really be a needs-based program. So just wanted to mention that. Please go over to vetcation.org. And our immediate need is we need vacation homes. So we need vacation homeowners who are interested in helping out these really, really deserving families. And it's really going to be an awesome cause. I've been doing it with my own vacation home for many years. And then a family that I helped is kind of wanted me to expand this. And so they're actually helping me in this cause. So email me, get a hold of me, or check out vetcation.org. And we'd love some more help and to add homes to that profile. It's a totally new site. Looking forward to it. It'll be awesome. In this episode of the Page One Podcast, you're going to learn from Joe Fisch, CEO of Wine Access. We're going to talk about the mindset he's used to turn around companies. And then after they're turned around, what he's looking for and what he's thinking as he moves to high growth. Joe is the CEO of Wine Access, a leading online direct-to-consumer wine retailer offering access to premium, highly sought-after bottles from renowned winemakers around the world. Under his second year of leadership as CEO, Wine Access was named as one of Wine Enthusiast's top 5 online wine retailers in 2020. Prior to being promoted to CEO in 2018, Joe was VP of Finance and Administration, responsible for leading the company's financial growth and business development strategy. Prior to Wine Access, Joe was Director of Finance at Ghirardelli Chocolate Company. Before Ghirardelli, Joe was CPA in California and spent 7 years at PricewaterhouseCoopers in both M&A advisory and audit practices. Joe, welcome to the Page One Podcast.
Luke, well, thanks for having me, and excited to be here.
Cool. So that was a mouthful right there. But if you don't mind, please describe your company, Wine Access, and how you guys serve customers.
Yeah. So I think did a great job of laying it out. As you said, we're a direct-to-consumer wine e-commerce company and really focused in kind of 4 different pillars in which we're built. So you have wine curation. We've gone out and got the absolute best wine team in the nation, master of wine, master somm, former beverage director of Morimoto. We have deep relationships all over the world, finding the best possible bottles. It's all told with really compelling content and storytelling. So every wine that we put out for our consumers have a 500 to 1,000 word narrative. We write all of our own tasting notes, and we really try to make it so that the consumer is able to feel like they're in the tasting room or in the cellar or walking the vineyard with the winemaker. Always ensuring perfect provenance. So making sure that the wine gets to your door in pristine condition, so it tastes the same exact way as it did when we tasted it with the winemaker at the vineyard. And then lastly, big commitment to customer service. So always look to over deliver, and it's a big tenet of ours. So that's how we kind of see ourselves in the world of wine.
Great. And Joe, what is the average value, or let's say, I'd say average order value, but you probably get a lot of people buying multiple bottles, but just so maybe we can understand, the level of wines you're selling, what is the average bottle cost, I guess?
Yeah. So average bottle price is around $30, but we offer things from as low as $15 up to $1,500. So we really have just about everything that you could ask for. But no matter whether it's $15 or whether it's $1,500, the bottle really has to over deliver, and that's our commitment, is to make sure that no matter where you're drinking within the category, across different varieties, across different countries, you're going to have a bottle that's going to absolutely over deliver.
Yeah. And how big is your team? We're going to get into the turnaround story, but up front, just wanted to get a little bit more on the company background. We got a lot of CEOs listening. They love to hear kind of team size. And you talked a little bit about the org chart. And then after that, we'll get into like the most important KPIs that you want to deliver on.
So we have about, I think we're about 41 or 42 right now. I think we've added about 10 people in the last year. So we've had a lot of growth in the last year. And wine team itself, which are our wine sourcers, there's about 5 of them.
That's awesome. And then how about the top KPIs? I know you're a financial guy by background, and now you're running a company. I wonder if any of that's changed, or what do you really like to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I would say NPS is probably my number one. I think I obsess over that. So every single review that comes through, I'm all over it. It's probably the first thing I look at when I wake up in the morning, and then looking at our yearly active buyers. So are we growing the buyer base, and are we making sure that the customer is happy? Because I find that if NPS is trending up, there's a really good chance that my repeat purchase rates are doing well. Revenue is probably growing. So that's something that the entire company is hyper focused on.
That's cool. Now, as far as NPS goes, what software are you using? How are you guys quickly tracking that?
Yeah, we just launched. I shouldn't say we just launched. It was earlier Q4. I want to say Delighted, and we've been really happy with it.
Oh, okay, cool. We'll have to check that out. So Delighted. And how does that, just in basic terms, how does it work? How are they actually gauging your NPS?
Yeah, so scores 0 through 10. So anything that is a 9 or 10 is a plus. I think 7 and 8 is neutral, and 6 and below would be a negative or detractor to the score.
Yep. And it's just an email, because I think we're doing the same thing with I think we're using Freshdesk for that, but it's simply an email after you've served a customer. It could be maybe just on a sale, or even on calls in for service. Is that basically how it works?
Yeah, so it'll be triggered. We typically do it via sale. Generally, we do it 6 to 8 weeks after, and then you will only get it. I think we're doing it once a year, or once every 6 months, so that we're not obviously hitting the same people over and over and over. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So 6 to 8 weeks after, you want to make sure they're done with that wine, hopefully. And so they can, instead of just being delivered, they might put in their newer wine fridge, and they're storing it, and you want to hear back from them, hopefully after they've kind of enjoyed it. Cool.
Yep.
Great. So listen, the theme, for everybody listening, is that we're going to talk about a specific turnaround story, what Joe was thinking, what Joe did, and then also kind of how he changed his mindset to high growth after that. So Joe, why don't we start by kind of describing Wine Access, describe the turnaround, what had to be fixed, and why, kind of, get us in there on the ground level.
Yeah, absolutely. So about two and a half years ago, stepped into the role, as you had mentioned, into CEO from VP of Finance and Admin. And at the time, we were definitely facing some self-inflicted headwinds and self-inflicted wounds. We'd lost a bit of our identity as a company. So as I mentioned before, those pillars have been around in the identity of Wine Access in one way or another for the last 15 years. And there was a 2-year period where I think we really lost sight of that. So we weren't delivering top-notch wines in the same way. Our storytelling had got a little stale and a little flat, and our promise to deliver wines on time in pristine condition we weren't simply living up to that. So when I look at it, we weren't delivering our commitment to the customer, and in particular, we're having a really hard time delivering wines on time. And it definitely put us off track. You can imagine if you ordered a wine and we said it was going to be at your house next week. And as a lot of you know, for alcohol, you have to physically be there to sign for it. It's not like Amazon where you can just drop the box off and leave it there. A lot of people would have to block out their days in order to sign for the wine. And if it doesn't show up on time, or it's late, that obviously is a huge inconvenience for the customer. So we sat down and we looked at all the kind of different things that we weren't doing well. And we said, okay, if we price the wine this way, how do we think the customer is going to react? If we said that we promised to deliver on next Thursday and it didn't make it on time, how would the customer feel about that? And every single component of the business, we started to look from that very customer obsessed lens and it made us reevaluate a lot of our focuses. So we had, for that 2-year period, focused very heavily on customer acquisition, and we were just pumping money into that, really looking to drive growth, but we weren't getting the repeat purchases from them. And it could be a couple of things, as I mentioned, shipping, but also when we think about our product, it wasn't top notch. And I think of that more from the website user experience. So we said, are we making it easy for customers to buy? And I think if we were to look at it and say, okay, if we go through the website, the answer is no. So then we really started to say, okay, we're going to focus on doing, let's do the basics right. And then let's shift some of our focus from pre-purchase into purchase and post-purchase. Because if we do those things right, we actually think that our customers will end up being the best referral mechanism. And guess what? A customer recommendation is a lot cheaper than spending money in social or SEM or any one of those other places. So that's where we really kind of shift our focus and made sure, okay, we're going to be hyper focused on what really drives the customer experience, and anything that's not really in that realm, we're gonna push aside.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And just taking some notes here. You guys lost your identity. You weren't really delivering top-notch wines. The service wasn't that great. The website was clunky, and then you just basically focused every decision on the customer. So before we move on from that, a couple questions. What type of delivery service were you using? So that's interesting. Everything's got to be signed. Obviously, you got to have someone over 21, I'm assuming, signing for this wine. Is it like a 2-day air type of service that requires a signature? And then how is that scheduled so that that the consumer does know it's coming in? Obviously, we're doing that for freight. With small parcel, there's tracking numbers, but you might have had to add like better software that was kind of alerting when the time of the day was, or something to that effect. Would like to hear kind of how those logistics work.
Yeah, so everything's shipped last mile, UPS, FedEx, but the component of the supply chain where we were probably underinvested was on our inbound, focusing on inbound warehousing, and then aggregating all the wine at our 3PL and then pushing it out. So, I think another place where you're saying, okay, if we're probably under invested in this area, brought in an absolutely top notch COO to really help look at, okay, what were the assumptions that we're making in setting up our supply chain? Does it make sense? And then ultimately saying, are we staffed appropriately to make sure that we're getting product out on time? So having him was absolutely critical in helping alleviate a lot of those pain points that we had.
Yeah, I mean, the CEO or COO, that's your right hand. Did you have to use a search agency for that? Were you guys able to find that hire internally through your own HR, or was that kind of a friend or contact that you had from previous business?
We had got lucky that it was a contact that we had. The wine, I would say that the wine industry is pretty small, and although his background wasn't necessarily moving wine, it was a supply chain expert in another industry. He does have a big affinity for wine and his own wine label. So he had been looking to break into industry, and fortunately, I think with how small the wine world is, names can get passed around quickly, and we got lucky in that sense.
Yeah.
And saved on recruiter fees, which is always a nice one.
That's all I'm asking. On the flip side, it's like they're so good at finding really good people. So I guess I asked that question because when you're at the C level, it's really hard, and not just a regular recruiter. Sometimes you need an executive recruiter. But that's a great story. Now talk about the website. So the website was kind of clunky, as you mentioned. Did you have to change platforms? And if so, what platform are you using?
So we didn't have to change platforms, which was nice. It's a homegrown system, Python Django platform. But there was a few, I would say, decisions when it was initially rolled out that probably didn't make as integrative an experience as possible. So we have, I'd say, kind of 3 different revenue streams, so to say, on the website or marketing mechanisms. We have one, which is the daily offer, which is a single SKU. We have an online store, which you can pick for multiple SKUs, just like in any kind of standard e-commerce site, and then the wine club. And the way that the stack was built was actually that the daily offer, which is our largest revenue stream, and the online store, which is our fastest revenue stream, weren't integrated. So you would add the daily offer wine to your cart, but then it would kick out any wines that you would have that you ordered from the store. So like very basic.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Things that you think would have been basic, but it's just like that would be like the most frustrating experience. I mean, you had to really, really, really want to buy wine from us. So it was just cleaning up. You know, I use that example, but there's plenty of other ones, some of which probably really painful to remember back. But how do we clean that up? What are the pain points? You know, what's our page load time? You know, if it's anything over a second, it's way too long, and even that feels too long. So it was like, how do we really work down, you know, some of these user experiences that are just driving down conversion and fix those before we spend dollars elsewhere.
That's great. And so, I think you may have covered a lot of these things, but I guess the next thing I wanted to dig into is, so you're promoted to CEO, and you're looking at a transition. What's kind of the first thing that you focused on at that point?
Yeah, I think with any strong company, it's, do we have the right people on the ship? And then are there any of the wrong people on the ship? And you fight as hard as you can to make sure you keep those right people on, because a company just simply doesn't operate without them. So I was fortunate that had a great management team, and a few people who had been with the company since I started in 2017. So I think you sometimes learn. I think you actually learn more when things are going wrong than good. And I fought as hard as I could to make sure that they were on board. They felt that the company was moving in the right way, and make sure that you do everything you can, because without them, you just simply don't have a company.
Yeah, you're probably preparing them for war. You're coming in and saying, hey, things are going to have to change. But at the same time, you've got great people. And, I've always learned about change management, and you're going to basically change course. You got to show them the vision, but you also have to create that urgency. And it sounds like that's what you did with the team. What had surprised you then during that turnaround as you went through it?
Yeah. So we had I mentioned before, we had a number of missteps and certain customers not very happy with us, whether it was, fulfillment migration that didn't go as well as we'd like. I would say I was surprised that customers that we underperformed for, or they were underwhelmed, were so willing to come back. And I think that speaks to, if you have a really strong brand and then you do the right things afterwards, they'll normally give you a second chance. And I think I was actually really surprised by that. So when we kind of stumbled coming out of the blocks in 2017 and part of 2018, we issued a heartfelt, direct mailer to every single one of the customers where we thought that we had fallen down, whether it was, hey, we didn't like the wine selection as much, or on-time delivery wasn't there, or I felt like your customer response time wasn't as fast as we would have liked it to be, and said, okay, we hear you. We see these as the issues. This is what we're doing to correct it. And specifically on the shipping issues, we said anytime a shipment is late, absent of acts of God like wildfires or something like that, we're going to issue a credit on the spot, no questions asked. You don't have to request it; it just is going to hit your account. And the response was really, really positive to that. I'm trying to think if I would have had if I had issues with the company, whether I would come back, and maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But I think I was surprised at how willing customers are able to give you a second chance if they think that you're being authentic and you're being transparent and you're not trying to pull anything over on them.
Yeah, well, in America, everybody gets a second chance. And that is a cool story, though. And I think actually, what I take out of that is just how human you were on the response. It wasn't a corporate, quote unquote, corporate email. It was a very kind of relatable human email back to your customer saying, hey, we messed up, but we're going to change for the better. And I think people really do respond well to that. And actually, I think it's a great marketing call. Like a really, sounds like a pivotal moment, and also, a little bit of a risk. But congrats and kudos to you guys on sending that out. I haven't heard of a company doing that. I think that's really cool. So it's a great story.
Yeah.
Through that process, Joe, what resources were most important to you, to help you perform at a high level?
Mm-hmm. So I always think, first and foremost, a really supportive wife or partner, or family or child. I really believe that the foundation starts at a personal level. And when you have that rock at home, it makes it so much easier to go about your day. So if home is solid and you at least get 6 hours of sleep, it'd be nicer to get closer to 8. You're already kind of winning the day. So I remember when I told my wife that I'd be moving into the new role as CEO, she didn't miss a beat, and her response was like, okay, great. What do we need to do to make sure you're operating at optimal performance? And that really, really goes, I think, a long way. So that, from kind of a personal level, I thought is absolutely critical. And then I was also really fortunate to have a very supportive board, not just with our investors, but also operators that were on the board as well. To be able to have someone who has deep domain knowledge in e-commerce, or has run a couple of different businesses is absolutely critical. And I think without that, it would make my job so much harder. And surrounding myself with coaches, whether it's my CEO coach that I have, who's also a consumer of ours, so I get both kind of helping in crafting leadership style, but also okay, this experience that I had didn't work out. And I'm your ideal customer. Like, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? So I think having coaches, having support, very, very important. And overall, just any sort of network, whether it's something like YPO, Young Presidents Organization, or any other kind of professional network like that, is really, really helpful.
That's a great list. But I think that was really cool to hear about the story with your wife and in giving you that support. I mean, man, that's priceless. Awesome story. And thanks for sharing that. So, you talked about what you had to do. What really stands out to me is focus on the customer. So that's the biggest note that I've taken, and my biggest takeaway on that. But now, you're turning the company around, and, fast forward a couple of years, how has your mindset changed? How do you transition to kind of a high growth mindset, and what does that mean?
Yeah. So I think when we're focused on whether it's turnaround or whether it's high growth, it's always going to be focus on the customer. I think that the number of initiatives, though, or opportunities that come up in high growth are going to be a little bit different than during kind of turnaround, because it's typically like, okay, let's really focus on this one revenue stream or this, one process. Let's do it over and over and over until it's absolutely excellent and perfect. And I think that as opportunities come up in a turnaround phase, we may not jump at them. One, because the resources might not be there. Two, we haven't felt like we've actually fully delivered on our promise that we had set forth. So I think while you definitely have innovation, because obviously if we're doing the same thing over and over and over with no innovation, someone's going to pass us by. But I think the number of kind of chances you can take are limited. So you can't have a bunch of big swings and misses unless you're really, really well funded, which most of the time in a turnaround, you're trying to get back on track and prove it out. So I think that we have been taking a lot more swings as we've moved into growth, knowing that not all of them have to hit, and not all of them have to be a 2 to 4 week payback or a 2-month payback. It can be a 3, 6, 12 months payback, so long as it makes sense. So I think that's where we've been able to really kind of change our mindset and how we approach different opportunities.
And along that way, have there been any big challenges that have stood out, during the expansion phase?
I think the keeping infrastructure is just always keeping that up to speed. I feel like, it's very rare where you just build, a football stadium like infrastructure, but then your revenues could fill a high school stadium. It's always as if like, I have college stadium, type growth, but your infrastructure always kind of lags. So I think that's the biggest thing that we're trying to figure out and make sure that we're not getting too far out over our skis.
Yeah. Anything on the infrastructure stand out that you had to change? It's always great when we, if we hear about certain software that you like now or something new that came up on the ERP system. Sounds like you're using a 3PL, but I'm curious if you had any major overhauls on the infrastructure.
So we haven't launched an ERP. So our system's homegrown. So I think it's just as we've started to adapt and we've built out our online store, I think is doubled in the last year, which has expanded our SKUs a lot more tracking as far as on different codes for supply planning. And we've been trying to keep up by building different supply planning, again, all homegrown supply planning tools kind of in-house to manage inventory. So that's been probably the biggest, kind of one of the biggest pain points. I'd love to say like we nailed it and we're doing it perfectly. We definitely aren't, but we're not out of stock too often, and it seems to be moving in the right direction.
Yeah. We used to have in Newer, we used to have a homegrown, custom made proprietary system from the ground up. It was great because it was very flexible on the operations side. It ran, we had another one that ran our websites. But it was a challenge on the financial side. None of us were financial people, when this thing was being put together, and you obviously are. Does your system adequately handle the financial side, or do you have to kind of drop data into some other platform that?
So we use QuickBooks and we both retail third-party products, but then also have our own product that we produce in-house. And it's definitely not like the JDEs or the SAPs of the world where we have work orders in the system and everything's perfectly tracked at the product level. So we're on QuickBooks and probably will be for a while. So definitely a lot more of a manual workarounds and putting more bodies at it as opposed to system.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we were doing something similar. We just couldn't write, an actual financial back end, right? I mean, it was different on the ops side, but it allows for a lot of customizable solutions. So I definitely can understand that end of it. Through this process, going from the financial role that you were in, and even in the past, and now being a CEO, how's your leadership and management style changed? Yeah,
I always have thought that you got to trust your team to make the right decisions for you. And that's why they joined the team kind of in the first place. Kind of during my time as a VP of finance and admin, most of the time I would say that you're speaking finance language, and you're so used to essentially working your entire career within kind of that discipline. And for the most part, if you're pretty good at your job, you're able to kind of adapt that language across the different departments. And you have to have somewhat of an understanding of how those departments work. I think when I moved into CEO, you go from, hey, I was, quote unquote, the sharpest person in the finance department, or at least you would kind of hope so as that leader, to going to, hey, I'm overseeing the company, and all these people just are light years ahead of me in their respective disciplines. And it goes from, hey, I know almost everything about finance, forwards and backwards is the same I would expect our, CMO and COO to, God, everything in this company. I feel like I'm so far behind everyone else. So it really requires a really high level of trust with your team and making sure you hit on those positions and on those hires. So I think it's being a little bit more hands off, obviously trying to know everything you can, but knowing that, no matter how hard I study customer acquisition and top of the funnel and bottom of the funnel marketing, I'm never going to be even remotely as good or as close as my CMO. And I think letting go a little bit of that control can be challenging for some people.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a really great comment, a really telling comment, that you have a lot of humility, and which is really important to have in leadership, but also that you got a great team, right? You don't want to be the smartest one in all. There's a problem actually if you were the the leader in all of those categories. So probably speaks to both ends of that. But a really interesting perspective, and one that we don't often hear people talking about. So really glad that you brought that up. You have like a really interesting story where you've kind of built this relationship with the customer, even on a text basis, where this customer maybe, or it sounds like he kind of sends you different ideas and suggestions on the business. I read that, in kind of the notes leading up to this. I think it's awesome. You're staying very close to your customers, which is kind of the theme of this turnaround. What do you think other CEOs can learn from this?
Yeah, I always think that your customers are your best source for your product, and it can be, is it the wine product, and what are they telling you? What do they want to drink? What do they like? Or product features on the website. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, this is who we do it for. So the more time you can spend with customers, the more time you can get their ideas around things, it's going to make the company and the product just that much stronger. I always think that, I don't spend enough time with customers. It was a lot easier, I think, in the pre-COVID days, because we used to throw a lot of events. So I get to see a lot of the same people, and we could talk about different things that we're doing at the company, and you kind of get a real-time sort of focus group, and it's easy to do because anyone will come to an event for wine. So I just think the more time you spend with, the more time you just spend with people, whether it's your customers, whether it's your suppliers, whether it's with your team, kind of the better.
That's a really cool story and a good way to kind of finish up here. But before we let you go, would love to learn your best business advice that you've received that you could pass on to the audience.
Yeah, I think the bad days are never as bad as they seem, and the good days are never as good as they seem. So if there's times where we can't do anything right, and it's getting product out late. We launched a feature on the website and it didn't exactly work how we thought. We put a product in front of our customers and it didn't resonate. And most of the time, at least to date, we get through it, and it's never really as big of a deal as it is. And then when we have an awesome day, same thing. I think it's important to celebrate your wins, but we still have to do it again the next day and the next day after that. So I think trying to maintain a steady state, not getting too high and not getting too low, has probably been something I can't say I do that all the time because I'm an easily excitable person, but it's been a nice guide to think about, especially on the tough days.
I couldn't agree more. And that's a leader's job, right? I mean, if we have to be consistent, and we can't get too up and down about things because things are hitting us all the time, and also don't want to show that to the team, right? We have to kind of lead that team with confidence. So I think it's a great final comment to finish up here on. Joe, how can listeners find you, learn more about you, learn more about Wine Access?
Yeah, so easy to find us. It's wineaccess.com. That's wineaccess.com.
And we'll have that in the show notes. Really appreciate you coming on. It was a lot of fun kind of going through this and specifically really focusing on turnaround and getting your opinion on that. I know there's a lot of value in there for the listeners here. And before we let everybody go, just a reminder, started up a new organization, vetcation.org. This is a not-for-profit. And I kind of have a really special team that's joined me on this. And we're in need of beautiful vacation homes. We need those so that we can send veterans, really families that are in need of a vacation, to those homes. So if you have a home, if you know somebody that does have a home, please get a hold of me, email me, find me on LinkedIn, or go to vetcation.org to learn more. We're targeting Purple Heart Day, which is in August. And we're going to get some deserving families. We got some great videos that you'll all get to see of these families and veterans that really need a vacation. So we're just trying to match them with vacation owners. And like I said earlier, I've been doing this with my own home for many, many years, but then kind of found this couple that I had helped, and now they're kind of joining me to help me out and putting a great team together to do this. So vetcation.org. And I want to thank everybody for listening today to this interview. Truly appreciate your reviews on iTunes and hope you join us for the next interview. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Page One podcast with Luke Peters. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us out by leaving us a rating on iTunes. Want to double your online sales? Check out www.retailband.com. And don't forget to join us next week with our next amazing guest.